As we start out on these participatory processes, we first need to ensure that we have a shared understanding of the terms that we're going to use over the next few days. In many countries of Africa, and indeed in other parts of the world, there are not terms that differentiate between the words risk, disaster, and hazard. And so we use a very simple method in which we draw, visually create a storyline on this paper, which helps members of community, even those who are illiterate, to understand what we're trying to explain. So here we have a picture of a simple village along the banks of a river. Now normally the river would be considered a resource because the people from the village use it for watering their crops which grow by the river and for cooking, cleaning and other household uses. And this is all very well during a normal day. But what happens when the weather changes? During a storm event, we'll have high rainfall, and then the situation changes. So these people who are living with a wonderful resource, which is the river, now live next to a hazard. Because the rainfall starts to fill the river and the level of the river rises. And suddenly it starts to overflow its banks. And so what was previously a resource becomes a hazard. And the people who live near the river face the risk of flooding. But only some people are at risk of flooding and not others. And that's because the people living closer to the river and lower down the hill are vulnerable to flood risk. And so these are the vulnerable members of the community. Whereas these people here are generally quite safe. And of course, if the level of the river rises even further, then even these members of the community are likely to face the prospect of a disaster.